Well, hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. This is our first spin off show from the regular book club. It is the name of the show is Tell It Like It's Lived, and it's hosted by the two wonderful authors behind me that I will introduce in a second. We are streaming live. We are on Book Club Island at a special part of Book Club Island, a secret part. But if you're coming in world now to the regular URL, you will actually come out here, right here at the Cool Beans Cafe. So Tell It Like It's Lived is a show hosted by Yvonne Battle-Felton and Anne Charnock. You can see their books here on stage. If you click it, you find out more information about them. Anne's latest release is Bridge 108, and I'm reading Gramercy because Gramercy is Yvonne's second line name. Her book is Remembered. So, without any further ado, as I have promised many times, I'm only the producer and the streamer of this program, not the host. So I will go to the back of the room and let the two hosts take over and explain what the concept of this show is, and let's take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Drax. That's a great introduction. It's wonderful to see we've actually got people in the audience for this first event. We weren't
Yes.
sure word had got out there yet. But hopefully these will be very welcoming events where people feel they can just come and have a go. Maybe you haven't read before in public, or maybe you've read many times and just want to find a different audience. But perhaps Yvonne would like to say more about the kind of readings that we might be looking for.
Of course. Again, I want to say thanks everyone for coming as well. And so we're open to, I think, just about anything. So it could be a draft, it could be something that you're a work in progress, it could be something that you've published somewhere before. The main thing is that it's your words. So it might be a poem, it might be creative nonfiction, fiction, an extract from a novel, memoir. There's so many things that you can share, but it does have to be your work so that you have the right to share it. This isn't like a workshop where we're giving feedback or anything like that. So we'll be, applauding, and it's going to be supportive. Um, Maybe after people read, we might, ask a question or two about the piece or maybe about the inspiration behind it. But it's really just a comfortable space to share words kind of like amongst friends and to be supportive. So I know that's what I'm really hoping that we can just create that community vibe and support one another as we write. But it is really important to have a place where you feel like you can share your work and read it live. So that's how I'd like to use the space.
Yvonne, can you go a little one step back about the concept here about reading? Do people have to sign up somewhere? They ping you, or how does that work? Do they have to be published authors, or?
I'll answer it one question, like one at a time, I guess. But so I should first say that I have a horrible memory. So like if people ask me questions and it's multiple things in it, I either answer the first one or the last one because at some point I start thinking, coffee. But
We are in a
so
coffee place.
yeah, I know, right? So all I need is like a fresh, creamy cup of coffee with some flavored cream, and then all is right for, a few minutes. But so to answer first the question that I remember, no, you don't have to be published. It can anyone is welcome to read. But I do ask that you sign up so that way we know how many people to make space for, and that way everyone who signs up gets a chance to read. And so in order to sign up, I'm gonna let Drax answer that question because I feel like
Okay.
I know it, but I could be wrong.
Right. So this is a show where if you want to read excerpts of your published work or something that you are working on, you can send a message to, I would say, to me, to Anne, or to Yvonne. Her second life name is Gramercy. That's the display name, and then I'll pencil it in. I guess I'm the producer, so you can. I wanna take a little bit of the burden away from the host, so you can send me, you know, a message if you want to be part of this, if you want to read part of your work. And then you're scheduled for the next show. This is every Friday, the first Friday of the month. And I guess Yvonne and Anne, people can also then chime in and critique. But I suppose this is a safe space here where people don't have to be afraid that they're going to be, you know, hammered with criticism or unfair, uh, you know, harassment
Exactly. I
like
would
that.
say not necessarily critique because we're not giving that sort of time to give constructive feedback. I think maybe it might be a place where you can ask a question. Like if someone reads a piece and you're thinking, "Wow, I'd really like to know more about, whatever, whatever," then I think that's really useful. It's also really supportive. But what I wouldn't want it to be is kind of like, well, I never would, I wouldn't want anyone to ever say to someone like, "I didn't like that," or "I don't know why you talked about that," or "That didn't make any sense," or anything like that, because it's
Yeah.
not that sort of party.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not like running a workshop where you're
No.
bringing a piece of work to be critiqued. It's more of a fun thing to just have a go at doing a reading. It it's not really the forum for like criticism. I mean, I think it has to be
Mm-mm.
fully supportive, really. A fun event where you
I
feel
think
like
so too.
welcome, you can keep coming back.
Hmm.
I think so too. And I find like when I try to give feedback to people and they don't know me, then I spend a lot of time like just contextualizing what I'm saying. So I end up saying like, well, well, this is good and this, then this, right. And by the time I do all that, it's just, but if people know you, then you can kind of give them feedback or they know what you mean when you say certain things. And so, yeah, I think if it's just like a supportive space where we can share words and you don't have to be published, it doesn't have to be a piece that you're thinking, I don't, I'm going to submit this to somewhere or I'm not going to submit it somewhere. It could just be, these words were knocking around in my head and I just want to get them out and share them. And I think this would be a space where we could do that.
Wonderful.
I'm just thinking that maybe, if some people in the room now are thinking about doing a reading, and maybe doing a reading for the first time, is there any advice that perhaps we should be giving about how to think about doing a reading? What tips we could give just to give you a start? Would that be worthwhile at this point?
I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah. This,
Okay.
uh,
Sh-
can I ask because Yvonne, you're pointing out something really interesting. Just I have a burning question about this. Is it hard? How can we prevent people from being um, pushed into a sort of a defensive mode when you are at a reading? I mean, I have not been at readings. I mean, I do write stuff, but I'm not a novelist, so I constantly write and edit scripts or voiceovers or whatever, but I've never really been in a room where I don't know how that usually, what are the pitfalls in a room, right? Because you're describing an experience where you push where it's very easy to push people into like a defensive mode when they open up and share something.
Yeah. So I guess it goes two ways, right? So as the audience, but also as the speaker or the reader. And so it would be like if you're feeling defensive about a piece or you're feeling sensitive about that piece, then one, it might not be ready for you to share. You might not be ready to share it. I think sometimes like there might be something that opens up a level of vulnerability, and even someone saying, "Oh, that was that was really nicely told" or something. Even that might trigger something in you. But so if you're not ready to share the piece, please don't. Um, and then also, I would say, since we're all entering it and into that spirit of we just want to hear your stuff. We just
Hmm.
want to hear like interesting stories or funny stories or good stories or sad stories or interesting poems, but it's not, I'm not coming thinking oh, I really hope I make someone's day awful or I really hope I make someone cry, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not like looking for anything bad. And so when you walk through the door or you fly to the space, ideally, like you come just knowing I'm looking forward to sharing my stories or my poems, and I'm going to do that. And people are coming also going, I'm just going to hear some stories and some poems. And so
Yeah.
it's not a space for defensive things. And I think Anne and I also, if people are feeling defensive or responding in defensive ways, maybe one of our roles here would be able to say, like, um, that's not the spirit of it was intended, and maybe try to help people feel a little bit better about, the experience. What do you think, Anne?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to be totally supportive. I mean, when I've been to group readings in the past, it's normally been a question of the host just introducing people, giving a little background to who the person is, if they're already a published writer, and then just letting the person give their reading, and then everybody's little clap, 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 and then introduce the next author. I mean, sometimes I've been to a reading where, say for example, I was the only person doing a reading, and then at the end, the host might open it up to question and answers. But it's always been done in a very supportive way. There's never been anyone there saying, "Oh, I didn't like it," or "I thought that was boring," or
Yeah.
it's the atmosphere of a reading is far more one of like celebration and just encouragement rather than trying to engage critically with the spoken text.
I think you're right. So I co-host a true story open mic night with a friend of mine, and it's a wonderful space, and we kind of consider it Vegas. So people can come, they share their 3 to 5 minute true story, loosely exploring a theme, and whatever they give us, it stays there. We applaud, sometimes we cry, sometimes we laugh. It's in the spirit of the piece, and we don't it's not a workshop as well, so we don't no one comes up and says, like, that part where your dog died was interesting, but like, wow, when your grandma died, psh, who cared about that? Like, we would we would never do that. It's not that sort of space. It's also not when they talk about like writing being therapeutic, so it's probably not the place even like for that there either. But what it does is it builds community around stories, so people know that their stories are safe with us,
Yeah.
and they
Mm.
know that it's a space where we cherish that time and them coming in to do it. If you're reading here, I would imagine, like, so I don't memorize anything I read. um I mean, I've already said I have a bad memory. So I would be reading mine off of either out of a book, or I would never read my like handwritten stuff to you because I can't read my own handwriting. But it'll be something that I will have rehearsed it. So that was one thing, Drax. I think one of your questions was about like how to preparing for something. No, Anne, you were talking about like whether or not we should like give people some tips.
Yeah,
And one
Yeah.
of mine would be that it would be
Oh,
about
that's great.
rehearsing what you're going to read. So, whether you like, some people do it in front of a mirror. I usually don't, but it's because different things are important to me. So for me, it's like the tone of voice, the rhythm, the pacing, the sound. And so I will rehearse that so that I can feel comfortable doing it, and so that the words don't kind of take me by surprise.
mm.
Uh, I,
Yes.
one quick thing I want to read from the chat real quick because before this goes by, Elfbiter put in the chat, "Do not show work in progress to fools nor gentlemen." Finnish proverb, a proverb from Finland here. And I think you answered to what Dreams Fair was saying. Do you would there be an interest in reading unpublished poetry also? And Yvonne
And I said yes to
answered
that
with
one.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm pulling back the camera. If you're watching this on the stream, you can see we have a nice crowd. There's people actually around the corner sitting there on the tables actually. Absinthe, Karn, Dream, and Amethyst. They're probably outside of the your view from the stage. Yvonne and Anne. It's funny. And Paula just came in as well. Like we have a full house here. And Groovy and
Hello
Gentle
to
Heron is
everyone.
sitting here. They're sitting. And Cochrane Mayo is here too. Wow. So
If I was better at navigating, I would walk around and say hello to people.
don't worry. You uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with what Yvonne says about practicing. I mean, partly to get used to the text, because it's one thing to have written a text, it's another thing to actually speak it and perform it. But also, I think it's also just in terms of politeness to keep to the length of reading that's been requested. So
ah
sometimes you can end up a reading where you have four people supposed to be doing a reading of 5 minutes, and you get one person coming in and doing half an hour.
yeah.
It can happen. It's
Is it
worth practicing, making sure you're keeping roughly to the length of reading that's been asked for.
isn't there a trick, Anne, where you actually tell people do a 2 minute reading and then people do five? I mean, it's just like telling a teenager you got to get ready at 1 o'clock if you want to leave at 1:30.
Well, I think that's a bad way to start off, assuming everybody's going to break the rules.
Uh-huh. Shh, we didn't disclose these rules. It's a secret.
Yeah.
But I do think you're right. I think that is really important with the time. Just because there are people, it's always fine if you read shorter, because sometimes with poetry, people were like, oh, but I read it and it's done, and what do I do now? And you don't have to do another poem. It's fine. And just like if you're doing flash fiction, you don't have to stretch it. If it was, a minute or 2 minutes, then that's fine. That you give us what you give us. But yeah, but I agree. It's really good to adhere to that limit. If it's 3 to 5 minutes or 5 to 7 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is, you want to adhere to that as close as possible. And I think you only get comfortable doing that when you rehearse it, especially because sometimes not everything on the page is kind of translates to something you can read to an audience who doesn't have that context yet. And so it's kind of like knowing, well, when do I stop?
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes when you're reading, say, an extract from a novel, there's the awkward issue of how much background do you give
Yeah.
before starting on the reading, and do you include that within your 5 minute slot? So some writers always read from the beginning of the novel, or a very self-contained piece of text from within the novel. But I think, you can allow yourself, say, a minute to introduce, a minute or two to introduce a bit of context for the reading.
That's a good idea. I'm horrible with that though. Like if I start giving context, I would be the one to be like, and the person who did it was like, if like if I know a secret or something like that, I feel like I'm one of those people who would just like give spoilers.
Yeah, or I'd end up missing out the most important bit of background I was supposed to give. Yeah, you can get it totally wrong. I know when I'm practicing to do a reading, I'll have the text typed out, printed off. But what I find is that it can be quite different delivering it, as I said, to writing it. So when I'm practicing, what I might do is, if I'm finding there's a sentence where it just keeps coming out wrong, I'll actually underline the word which carries the most stress in the sentence.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the word I have to hit with the biggest stress, and it helps me to unravel the sentence then.
Do you
So
also find, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, carry on.
Now, I was going to ask, do you ever find that you read things that either aren't on the page or that you don't read things that are on the page?
I do edit as I go along. I find I'll do a reading and I'm
That
thinking, oh, it would sound better if I said this. And those decisions in an instant.
and
And
that's
so,
even with published stuff, like if you're reading something that you've published.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done that. I was once doing a reading and I actually edited it and put in a cliche. So it was so embarrassing. So I think it's just my mind working too quickly, and I should just need to kind of stop myself doing that. But what I do also mark on the sheet of paper, if I'm reading from a sheet, is that if there's dialogue and say there's a character who's got a deeper voice, I might put a little downwards arrow by their line of dialogue just to remind myself to drop the pitch of my voice.
Right.
I put silences like and pauses in mine. So like when I'm writing something for Stories at the Story, a lot of times I'll start writing and then think I'm writing one thing. So the theme might be about, I don't know, um, relationships or love or something like that. And I might think I might be like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write about this growing up in New Jersey. And then I end up writing about like getting married in Vegas. I don't even know, like something that's completely different. But when I'm writing, I don't think, well, I write out loud anyway. So I'm often thinking about how something's going to sound. That's not always for the reader, that's for me as the writer, so that I can like get into the rhythm of it, the pace, and the actual story of it. But then once I get it on the page and I know I'm going to read it somewhere, then I put in spaces and pauses and just things to remind myself to breathe. But I also put notes in it like, you're doing amazing. You're wonderful. You're
Hmm.
beautiful. Good job.
Oh,
But I was
really?
putting these, I do, and I do
Well,
it
what
like it's a
happens if you
job. Like I
forget
put these things.
that this should not be read out loud? You ever then accidentally read that out loud?
No, not that. But so what I did, I was doing the voiceover for Remembered, and before it, I had the draft and I put notes in it. So like most of the notes were about like the character or like what a character was feeling or their motivation for saying something, just like so that I would remember while I was reading it. But then of course, me being me, I put notes in it like good job. You're like you're lovely and like all these little notes and I knew the producer had like sent it to me and I knew I was sending it back to them. I was sending it back, I thought, so that they could like have it on the little the Apple thing and I could like read it while I was, performing it.
Hmm.
And that was part of it, but they were reading it too so that they would know where I was in the script.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, so like, and he was like, wow, these notes are quite robust. I've never quite seen notes like this for a reading. And then I was like, oh wow, yeah, he's actually reading what I've written. But fine.
this is so funny. I would I'm thinking of my work in radio where you deal with other issues, but as I promised earlier, I'm the producer. I'm the fly on the wall here. I'm the running camera. If you're just tuning in, this is Yvonne Battle-Felton and Charnock. And Aeon, can you toggle your mic, please? There is a sound coming through every once in a while. Thank you. And we have a nice crowd here, so I don't know if people want to come up and say something. This is the first inaugural program, so we're flying by the seats of our pants.
Except that Anne has promised us that she would read us the first. Don't you like the word promise? Like I never make
Yes.
promises to people, but like Anne has said, she would read the first page of a work in progress.
That's
No,
amazing.
I
it
know,
wasn't
right?
a promise. It wasn't a promise. It was a mere suggestion in case no one turned up today.
Hmm. I don't know. I may have, my memory
No,
being what
it's
it is, I may have
kind of
misheard
too
it
late. You
or.
have to.
But we have people who are actually also that I know. Some of these people are writing pretty good stuff. Some of the yeah.
Is there anyone here today who'd like to do a reading like now, or or is this more of a kind of get to know us session? But if you're really raring to go, please shout out.
Nobody was prepared for the rules. The rules were not handed out, Mrs. Charnock. They were not handed out. I couldn't prepare that my dog died and my grandma is still alive.
What I find interesting is that there are some writers who are just such natural performers,
Yeah.
and for other writers, I think it's kind of a learned technique to be able to read work. I I know before I started writing, I'd always been really nervous about anything connected with performance. So the idea of, say, doing any acting or taking part in amateur dramatics would have absolutely terrified me. But
How did you get over that fear?
well, it's funny really, because I was in a position that I did have to give a reading, just a 4 or 5 minute reading, and it was to a big audience, probably about 200. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? Because the thought of going on a stage or anything was really quite frightening. So I practiced with, my family, did it a few times. But actually, what surprised me was that when I went up and did the reading, I absolutely loved doing it. I think it's because I knew I was in control, because I had the sheet of paper. I wasn't having to memorize anything. I was familiar with it, and it was just a question of learning to say it rather than reading it in my head. So yeah, it came as a huge surprise. So, whenever the opportunity comes along to do a reading, it's not something, that gives me anxiety.
I'm one of those people who loves performing, and so I would 100% be like, yeah, I'll do it. And I do find also rehearsing it, performing it, I think that's great. If you can record yourself maybe doing it, that might be a way to kind of get, it's so that it's kind of easier to do. I'm reading some things. Let's see. I feel like some people do find it's scary or nerve wracking, but I guess it's kind of like you kind of lean into those nerves and let that energize you in a way that you can just have fun with it, and just because people are here who they want to hear your words. One thing is that remember that when you're reading, no one knows what's on the page. So you could be reading something and you could mean to say it's lovely to see you, and you might actually read I don't know, I'm sorry your dog died. All of my examples are around death, but I say this like it's a new thing, but they're always like this. I don't know why. But anyway, so when you read whatever you read, no one knows if that was a mistake but you. So you can actually just keep going with it, or you can, you can kind of, you can stop at any point and say, oh, this should be this. And if you stumble, that's fine. If you lose your place, you can just say, oh, 1 second, I just lost my place, and go back. So it's completely, it's forgiving. I think it's more forgiving than people know that it is.
I want to read the chat here real quick. Arieto says it's been hard for me to write. If you want to elaborate on that, Arieto, please, that'd be great. Ghostbeat says from reading to saying is a huge jump. And Fox says I have writing that I can read, and reading to family is way scarier than reading to an online audience. So I guess Fox is suggesting that he has something that he could read to us today. I wanted to ask you guys on the stage real quick about, or anybody in the audience, because Anne is basically saying something that I'm worried about as an extrovert who is fine with speaking in front of an audience, that our world is kind of designed to give advantage to the extrovert folks, generally speaking. So when you're a writer, you may not fit that category, and then you're also sort of thrown into the pool. And so even within this profession, now that everything is so performative, it also then again gives the advantage to naturally born performers in the writer's profession, and may actually be more of a burden to people who are naturally more shy.
Yeah, it's true. Really, writers should be allowed to just sit in the cave and get on with
Yes,
it.
that's what I mean. I think they should. Exactly. I'm trying to say they should not be judged by the same parameters that actors
Exactly.
who have chosen a profession in front of, crowds are.
Exactly. I sometimes think, right, I'll come off Twitter, I'll come off Facebook, I'll come off everything. Nobody cares what my opinions are. I'll just stay in my room and write the next book, because that's, all that matters really. But yeah, it does sometimes feel unfair that the extroverts kind of suit the marketplace better. But I think even for an introvert, in the right circumstances, especially like this in a virtual setup where nobody is actually looking at you,
Yeah.
you know, I think in Second Life, it's particularly easier for an introvert.
Yep.
And then, as I
There's a
say,
lot of studies.
and it's your words, so you're in control. So as long as you know how to sit on a bar stool, you know, it's kind of the easiest outlet for an introvert.
There's a lot of studies with students in an educational context how Second Life is very successful in the sense of leveling the playing field between shy people or people even with severe social anxiety. Yep.
And also, I'm an introvert, so like I know where I know how to set parameters and boundaries. So like doing events like readings and stuff like that, I do them. I love them. Creating events, I absolutely love doing that because it's like it lets me plan, it lets me bring things to life. I'm also it's because I love getting what I want. And if I have an experience in mind and I can bring it to life, then I am like completely satisfied. But I also need to take breaks throughout my day where I can just, be myself, be alone, have some quiet, maybe read a book, have some coffee, and just do nothing. Without those breaks, then, everything else is out of control for me.
Mhm.
But so I can, I guess, adapt to possibilities and stuff like that, regardless of personality.
That kind of balance, yeah. In the
Yeah.
chat, Amethyst saying Amethyst is sitting here. Interestingly enough, in the back here, Amethyst is saying introverts can surprise you and still not break the seal, so to speak. And that's well said. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
So it looks like it's time for Anne to read.
Oh, me! I thought it was. Is there Fox who
Fox, yeah,
wanted?
Fox
See, the
Sillenpaw.
thing is, when other people start to read, if they want to come up and here, come up to the stage and read, um, I once I leave the stage, I am gone for good. Um, I don't know that I can get back up anyway.
Oh, yes, you
So,
can. You just right-click the chair. Second Life is magic that way. So I think
well, you
Fox
would think so, but
indicated,
I
yes.
tried it before, and like when I turn around a certain way, my knees are actually outside the building.
Yes, I often end up in the street.
So I
Ah,
know once I get up, I'm sitting down, like, or I'm just, I don't know. I'm on the seat once, and then I'm and I'm off at once.
you can't even go to a nice Second Life city with you guys. You end up in the streets. What's happening?
Can't take us anywhere.
No.
So if we could read first.
I'll show you the
Yeah,
trick. You just scroll back into your head. It's super easy. You can do this.
How
If
did
you
that sound easy to you? You just scroll back into your head.
with the mouse, you scroll and then you see through your own eyes, and then you're good. Once you're sitting on the stool. Yeah. So meaning,
See, if I scroll back, I see West Fan. I'm no longer in that room.
hmm then you have to scroll forward.
Now I
so
see me again.
should we do a short reading each and then open it up?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Okay. Do you want me to kick off?
Yes, please.
This is where I do a kind of 1 minute introduction, which will take about 15 seconds. So this is a work in progress. It's a novel that has no title as yet. I simply call it Florence because that's the name of the main character. And it's all I'll say about it is that it's a contemporary novel and there's climate change in the setup. So climate related. So this is just, well, at the moment, it might even be the first page, but who knows where it'll end up by the time I've finished editing the book. It's quite a gentle introduction. There's not a lot happens, but I'll just make a start, shall I?
Can I ask one question? Do you map out your plot or you just start writing?
No,
Because
I just start writing and
Mhm.
hope for the best.
Okay.
So here we go. Chapter 1. In all the times I'd walked across Tower Bridge during my stays with Richard, I'd never encountered the bridge being closed, the central spans being raised to allow river traffic to pass below. Tourists snapped photographs of the bridge. I photographed the cyclists who had edged forward through the stationary vehicles and formed a phalanx at the pale blue gates across the two northbound lanes. Each cyclist stood poised, one foot on a raised pedal, ready to push off. It occurred to me I might never see this again, that I shouldn't assume I'd get another chance to photograph the cyclists like this, at the ready, and on such a fine day, a blue sky along the length of the Thames. I asked myself if I'd been unlucky to date, not having seen the bridge open before. Was it a rare occurrence? I felt unmoored, unable to assess the significance of the event. Should I feel exhilarated? With no shade on my side of the bridge, I pulled a cap out of my backpack. I can't stand the sun on my head. I looked upstream and spotted a wooden boat, unpainted, masted, but not under sail, possibly an ancient boat or a replica. It had snuck between the bridge piers, and it struck me as comical that such an unprepossessing vessel had brought the bullying road traffic to a standstill. The boat didn't even seem tall enough to warrant the bridge being opened, so I didn't mind the delay. I set off way too early from my brother's place, because I always work on the assumption that I'll lose my way at least once on the route from NEA to NEB. The bridge lowered, taking less than a minute to do so. The gate swung open and the cyclists tore down the road, dominating, if briefly, the approach to Tower Hill. On a cooler day, I might have felt envious. I like cycling. The cyclists soon lost their lead, chased down by a big bus London tour, a skip hire truck, taxis and a Pimlico plumber's van. I weaved between the tourists as the traffic belched alongside. The heaviest vehicles boomed across the join between the two bridge spans, creating an almost sonic boom, the familiar sound signature of the bridge. At the far end, a man had set up an easel and canvas. When I passed him, I turned around to see his attempt. He'd outlined the main compositional elements in black charcoal on an ochre ground. Not bad. And as I turned back, my eye caught a gull gliding towards the bridge towers before it veered uncaringly downstream. Had it cried, I doubt I'd have heard it, because an ambulance, siren sounding, chased across the bridge, heading south of the river, lights whirling, incident response vehicle emblazoned. So many dramas glimpsed every day in this city, and you never know how they end. And that's it. Just
Thank you. Bring out the clapping animations.
There's a clapping animation?
Oh yeah.
That would be nice.
I know, right?
Well, we'll get them going for next time. This was wonderful. Your tone, I mean, I read all of your work. I just find it amazing, coming from a music background, where people have their own tone, but I mean, this is probably not news to you that writers have their very own tone, but you have such a unique tone. How did you get this tone?
Well, it's a bit like the bridge having a signature sound, the boom repeating as the lorry goes across. I don't know. I mean, I think probably authors do have a signature style, whether they want it or not. Maybe some writers can break out of the signature style more easily than others, or maybe it's better to just, go with the way you write.
Mm.
I mean, I always admire writers who write in a way that I know I can't. So those are the kind of texts that I'm really drawn to, because I know I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
People with a more poetic, more lyrical writing style. I mean, I don't know about Yvonne, if you feel that authors have a style that they kind of get stuck with, or if it's something we ought to be able to flip out of.
It's a good question. I think for me it depends on what I'm writing. And when I first start, it seems like whatever the piece is, my internal editor has a bit of a sinister tone. And so my voice, it seems like when I'm especially as I'm getting to know the character, they often sound a little bit like they might give you a coffee or kill you. And so I try to break out of that, especially when I'm writing for kids. But so I think there's like a natural voice. Like I know that my instinctive first person narration is I don't know if it's because I started out writing murder mysteries or because I like love that sort of thing, or if what that says about my personality. But so for me to kind of sound differently and to get my characters to sound like themselves and not me, then I often will write to music, and then that will kind of break it from my tones and my rhythms.
I was under the impression that it's something that you desire. I mean, for a musician, for a jazz musician, the biggest goal is to have a recognizable style that you can recognize in, like, one note, like, I don't know, Miles Davis, for example, or something like,
I think there
um,
are some things that will be like things that are just signature, like me. Like I'm interested in the characters. I'm interested in setting in a certain way and my characters and engaging with it. And so I think language wise, some of the rhythms of the language may still sound like me, but would want all of my characters to sound distinct from each other.
yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
possible that like someone might, read a book and be like, oh, I can tell Yvonne wrote this. But even within that book, I still need my characters to sound,
Oh yeah, without
different.
without a doubt, absolutely. I didn't
Yeah.
mean to suggest that everybody of a cast of 200 should sound like Yvonne, wanting a coffee or killing someone.
Although that might not be a bad thing.
That's the being John Malkovich, but it's called being Yvonne, I guess.
I feel like that's my laptop doing that. I'm sorry, I don't know why it's doing that.
Y-
Yvonne, do you fancy doing a reading?
Sure. So I'm just going to read the first page. It's a work in progress. And I guess I'll do a little bit of what it's inspired by The Lottery, Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, um, which is
Let me
an
type
older
this in.
horror story. And I kind of wondered what it might be like if this book was today, not COVID today, but like kind of contemporary. So it's set in a small town, and I'm just going to start from the beginning. Warding off. I've been holding my breath forever. It shouldn't have taken more than 10 Mississippis for Jeremiah to finish. But no, here he is near 60, running out of breath, and Jeremiah is still fretting over which stick to claim as his own. There's one for everyone, I want to shout, but that's not really true, and lying today would be like lying to Mother Opal. She's so close to death that she can see the truth clear as if it had on gasoline drawers. And if she's heading straight to hell faster than a bat on a broomstick, there ain't no need in me being dragged down with her. Imagine a charter mother going to hell. At least that's where everyone says she's going, behind her back. Ain't no way no woman that's done all she's done is getting anywhere near heaven, the mothers say. Like if she'd been a man and done half of it, she'd been forgiven. Why that would matter, I don't know. We'll do this like she says to do it, or we won't do it at all, they say. Like anyone believes anybody other than the charters have a say anyhow. As if a few rumors would keep Curdle Creek from reenacting the warden off. Nobody but Mother Opal remembers all the words to all the sacred goings on here, so if she says gather sticks, we gather sticks. According to Mother Opal, there's one special stick that will let you know it's yours when the time's right. Maybe it's not Jeremiah's time. If one of them sticks are calling to him, maybe he can't even hear it yet. Or maybe none of them are calling him. Maybe, though he's near 15 years old, the fastest boy in school, the tallest kid this side of the Cheratici, he's no closer to being grown than my little sister. Maybe none of them can say a darn thing, and Jeremiah is just the first to find out. Maybe there's no such thing as ready either. No reason to prepare for a fight that hasn't come as long as I've been alive, and is no closer to coming now, as near as I can tell. All this picking sticks, seeing names, hiding from ghosts, it could all be in Mother Opal's head. Not that she's lying, she just ain't truthin'. Maybe she doesn't recognize the difference anymore. There's a reason Mother Opal's the only one who can remember back home. If she's wrong about all that, she's wrong about the swallows, the welling, the hush, the warding off, and Daddy. Tiny pinpricks sting my legs. Serves me right. I shift the wad of chewing gum I'm not supposed to have beneath my tongue. It's sucking up whatever spit's left in my mouth. I swallow it. It's brittle and dry. It'll probably kill me. Get stuck right in the middle of my throat. That's just what you get, Osira. I can almost hear Rumor's sing-song voice dancing right over my grave. And that's
Wow.
page 1.
Wow.
Clap,
Clap,
clap.
clap, clap, clap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask Anne and then or the other way around? Maybe you want first. What is this? About, you want to lay very briefly like the world that this is happening in, or uh, the 12-second back of the book teaser, or no?
It's a bit difficult, isn't it, at this stage? What do you think?
See, this is
I
fascinating
think for
because I
me, I'm
guess,
still figuring it out. It's
yeah.
more, I know this town is, it's deadly. So I started out writing this book. It was meant to be historical fiction, and I was going to write about either the Tulsa race riots or the Red Summers of 1919 in the U.S., which was a period in time when Black people were being persecuted. So they were living in segregated towns, but still they were set upon by white mobs and they were killed, and it was a horrible time. But I was thinking about writing about that just because it's horrible, and I want to make sure we don't go back to that, right? But I was doing the research for it, and then I was thinking, well, one, I don't want to write about these particular incidents because their grandchildren, their great grandchildren, they're still alive, and a lot of this hasn't been grappled with yet. Like, I know I'm curious about, well, so if someone was chased off their home in 1940, who actually owns that land? But
Mhm.
they're not discussions for me to have, I think, just out of curiosity, because the people, I don't know, I'm not trying to hurt any of the victims' families. But so I've decided I'm going to make up a town, and the idea of like the Shirley Jackson part of it, just the idea of a town who would hold on to traditions in order to keep itself running, like as if it's a person in order to keep itself alive, and the way that it sacrifices the people of the town. It's somewhat fascinating to me, and I found when I was writing this now everything between the Black Lives Matter movement, but also the reason behind the movement, the reasons that we need the movement, and then the lockdown. Right now, all I can write seems to be murder mystery or horror. And so this town, like these characters, they keep killing each other or like killing other the things that they're willing to do to keep themselves alive. It's quite harrowing. So I'm sure it's going to be something about like they say you can't return home, and sometimes you don't want to, or let's hope that saying is right. It's something, I know it's something around what society does to people and kind of who pays the cost for what we have.
So those are the themes. So because Anne was saying something interesting, and this fascinates me as somebody from a different world. Anne, are you saying that when you say it's difficult to say what this is about, that this could go in a million different ways still? What you,
No,
yeah?
no, I don't mean that actually. It's just that I mean, I do have a first full draft that I'm now working on, now editing. It's difficult in that when you finish a book, you have to then step back and learn how to talk about it, which is different to writing the back cover blurb. It's how do you introduce it to people? You haven't quite worked out the framing for the
Oh, I
book when
see.
you're in the middle of editing. But what I would say is, unlike my previous work, this is set in more or less the present day. In the past, I've written works set in the near future and in the past. So this is, a new area for me, and I wanted to come at climate change from a new angle. I mean, I've come at climate change in previous work, but this time I wanted to look at. I didn't want to write like a post-apocalyptic book. I didn't want to take the reader through a disastrous situation with experiencing wildfires or drought, or I just wanted it to be present day and to take a character who is in fact an artist and look at the impact on her and her brother of an incident that brings a kind of catastrophe within the family that's related to climate change.
Right.
So it's very intimate, and it's about how this woman's perception of her life, her own life, and her own art practice changes when she recognizes the value in something that she's lost. And the idea came to me years ago when, I think it was back in 2012 or 13, when in France there'd been a severe heat wave in the summer months in August. And I don't know if you're aware, but in France, most people take the whole of August off, and a lot of people just disappear off to the south of France and sit on the beach for 2 weeks or whatever. And so a lot of elderly people are left at home. And in the summer of 2012-13, there was this huge heat wave. And in the early days of it, there were a lot of deaths of elderly people suffering from heat stroke. So people came back from the south of France horrified to feel that they'd neglected these elderly relatives. And so when that happened, I just thought, well, that is tragic and nobody's to blame, but there is going to be a fallout in everybody's lives who are connected to this. So I just kept that at the back of my mind, and I thought, well, one day I might find a way somehow to introduce this into a piece of fiction, which is what I've attempted to do with this work in progress. So basically about a woman who's a practicing artist and showing how her role in a family has to switch with her brothers. She has to take on more responsibility with the family in the aftermath of this tragic event. But it's kind of nice in a way, because she's in the course of the novel, she's experiencing this kind of return to nature, that she's beginning to enjoy more, that kind of the environment around her. And hopefully that'll chime with the present day with lockdown and how we're all having to kind of look for silver linings. It's like it's like the whole of lockdown has been a training in, number one, survival, and number two, in looking on the bright side. And so hopefully by the time this work in progress is edited, it might you know, chime with current feelings. Who knows?
Also in empathy. I mean, if you're mentioning France here and people are left alone, the French are partying on the beach and elderly are left in the cities. We now have
Mm,
a situation where people who are elderly or disabled, and some of them are, they're locked down or room bound or housebound, or have been for a long time.
yes.
These kind of inequities are now totally amplified.
Mm. I'm just wondering, did Fox want to do a
Yeah,
reading?
Fox, and the producer and timekeeper. We're about 6 minutes to the top of the hour. So, see, Yvonne practiced. She already gave the stool. No,
You know, I
Fox.
did. I was like practicing that.
Fox is a
That is,
seasoned second lifer. Let's see if Fox can go up on the stage to the stool and introduce yourself and let us know what you're reading. Meantime, real quick, I'm looking through the chat here. Let's see here. Great feedback to both readings. Uh, really already gave me the shivers what Yvonne read. This is so exciting when this stuff is coming out.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, here is Fox. Fox, you're floating above the
Yeah,
chair
I
here.
totally am. I'm trying to hit the adjust menu right now. Hold on. Wait, negative my Z. Whoop. All right. So I don't I don't know. I've been a writer for quite a little while, and you know I was just recently published um in an anthology. So it's not like my own book, but it's a series of stories, and I have two stories that were selected for publishing. Um, and they're furry stories. So if any of you know what that means, like we're anthropomorphic stories. And the first story, I don't want to read like all of it necessarily because it's kind of long. The story itself is about 30,000 words.
Fox, can you give me quickly the title because I'm looking it up. I have it elsewhere, but I can look it up and then I can put the link into the chat here. If you give me the title of the anthology or if you have it handy from Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. The anthology is the Tales of Haven Celestia, and I'll put that actually in the local chat because that'll make it way easier to look up. So Haven Celestia is a universe created by Rick Griffin. Oh no, sorry, caps lock. So Haven Celestia is a universe created by Rick Griffin, and Rick Griffin is a very widely renowned sort of artist and storyteller. And So it started with a story called 10,000 Miles Up. And 10,000 Miles Up was about this, a group of aliens that had basically discovered a new planet, but were trying to hide it from their reptilian masters. Basically, I mean, they were slaves, and so Rick's friend saw 10,000 Miles Up, and he was like, you know what? There's a lot of potential with this environment. And there's a lot of potential with the storyline, and so Greg started writing his own stories about this universe, and so it became this thing that I don't think that either of them thought that it was going to be, and it was definitely not something that I thought I was going to be a part of. Um, and so Greg wrote like a whole trilogy based on this universe, and he's actually won. He's very, very close to winning more awards than any other anthropomorphic author has ever won before. We're waiting for the results of the next award show. Because furries got their own little society of like award shows and stuff. So, what happened with me was I was and I just want to talk about this a little bit, just so that anyone who doesn't know if they can write or they don't feel like their writing is good enough,
Fox, 1 second. I
that
don't
they
want to.
get
I don't want
like a
to
little
step on you, but as I'm the timekeeper,
kind of
we're coming up on the top of the hour.
vibe from
So,
where I came from.
Fox,
So
1 second.
what happened with me was last year I had someone that I widely respected as a creator put out an audition, and they were like, "Hey, give me your writing samples. Give me your best writing samples." And I submitted my best writing samples. And when the results came back, I was rejected. They were like, "Hey, thanks for submitting your writing and everything, but it's really not what we're looking for." And that was really, really discouraging. It was kind of crushing. And that was okay. I saw it and I was like, man, that really sucked. It hurt, but I got it. Well, very shortly after, I got a Twitter notification that Rick Griffin was doing this Haven Celestia anthology that I'm sharing with you guys today. And so I really poured myself into it. And my writing had just been rejected, but I knew that I had writing to write, and I knew that I had stories to tell. And so I took a lot of time to try and just get it onto paper. And so I'm going to read like a little bit about the story. It's there's a lot of background, so it's not probably going to make a whole lot of sense with just the narrative. But I'm going to try anyway. So here is the story's called Cold Brew. I'm actually only legally allowed to tell you 10% of it, so a couple pages. So thunder sounded around him, never fading. It roared into his ears until he thought they would bleed. Gripping his controls in desperation, his teeth clenched, tears of frustration in his eyes. Suddenly, like a slamming door, the noise stopped. He hurtled into the vacuum, propelled by the explosion. The pilot's body expanded and fluids leaked from his eyes. As the air rushed out of his lungs, any scream of terror or distress disappeared into space. Debris whipped past him, but his eyes focused on the distant lights of the engines of the starship speeding away. He fought to stay conscious, gazing at those fading lights. The unfortunate creature succumbed, left in the darkness and reduced to another object to endlessly drift through space. Chris sat up, his heart pounding and breath coming in desperate gulps. The Guru rubbed a furred forearm across his eyes, clearing any trace of tears as he tried to calm down. Just a dream, he thought. Miserably, the captain corrected himself. Not just a dream. The same dream tormented him for years. On a regular, recurring basis, he experienced that sequence of events thick with betrayal and fear. Not every night, but more often than he liked. He sighed long and deep before throwing his thin sheet aside and swinging a thick leg off his rack. Captain Chris was a neat and organized sort of person. Everything had and was where it should be. He kept his deck clean and his desk organized. Each personal hygiene tool sat at 90-degree angles. After a moment's respite resting at the side of the bed, he stood up and stretched his long, broad shoulders to the tip of his thick, dark brown tail. The cracks and pops along his spine reminded him of his age. Shaking his head, the Guru began his morning routine. Stepping in front of his mirror, he combed the gray-flecked chocolate fur along his short muzzle and wide cheeks, trying to soothe the disheveled feathers into alignment within the contours of his jaw. Once satisfied, the captain carefully placed the comb in its place, seeking his toothbrush instead. Particular about his teeth, Chris brushed them for a solid 5 minutes, then spat the water and paste into the sink where suction slurped it away for recycling. A few seconds later, Chris clipped his holster into place. A synthesized voice spoke from the speaker nestled within the beige overhead. Good morning, Captain Chris. How may I assist you? Cold brew, the captain mumbled. Right away, the voice recalled. Right away, there came a whirring of machinery within the walls. A cup dropped onto the tray table seated within the bulkhead. An unseen dispenser delivered the javia. Javia is like our word for coffee. Javia into the cup in the form of a thick stream. Chris threw a heavy black cloak, a symbol of his rank, over his shoulders and placed his sidearm into its holster. The giver scooped up his breakfast javia before leaving his chambers. Stepping into the main passageway, he could tell he was the only one up, save for the night watches. The captain usually rose before the rest of the crew, so this did not surprise him. 26 other mostly loyal creatures made up his crew, but only a foolish captain let their guard down. Rising early, sleepy as he was, helped instill a sense of omnipotence into the ranks. Casting his eyes about, he strode through the couple of steps that separated his cabin from the bridge. Each plantigrade claw landed heavily on the deck. Plopping himself down in his chair, he called up the navigation display with a small paw gesture. The ship drifted off course. It pulled starboard over great distances, but Chris didn't really concern himself over it. The captain found his head swimming with thoughts about his dreams. The familiar feeling of sadness ate away at his insides, gnawing like a hungry beast that seemed to have no limit to its appetite. Chris sipped his drink and leaned his head over to the rest of the pads in his paw. Gloomily, his auburn paws stared into the clear polymer material that separated him from the brutal vacuum of space, unlike the pilot that haunted his sleep. And so that's how I introduce the book. I really don't think that I can read all 20 pages that I talked like I was going to. So,
Fox, awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
it's really hard to read out loud.
It is.
But Fox, you broke the ice. I'm really, really happy, and I apologize. I was looking at the clock and going like, oh my God, Fox is gonna read his entire book as we're at the approaching the end of the hour.
If you don't feel like you can write, or you feel like that
people
no one's
not
paying
hear me?
attention to the things that you write,
Hello?
just write anyway.
Well, thanks a lot, Fox. That's great. Like Jack said, it's great to have had our first visitor to the cafe who's done a reading. That's brilliant.
So when I was writing a story for this anthology, I wrote it knowing that I was up against a lot of other authors.
Yeah.
Because you can only have so many stories accepted into an anthology, and so I wrote the one story, and I knew how that story was going to end when I started writing it. But I wrote a second story as well, and the editors hated the second story. They were like, "What the hell did we just read?" And I was like, "Hey man, I don't know. I just wrote the thing." But both stories ultimately ended up getting accepted, and they're published into the book.
This is an awesome success story.
I don't necessarily know how. I just adjusted things as I needed to. But the fact of the matter is, the root of my current truth is that if you want to write, write. And if someone says that they don't like it, no, I can't hear Drax.
Now I'm not speaking. No, finish your thought. I was saying something earlier. I'm just really, really glad that you broke the ice from the audience and stepped up to the stage and you were reading. So that's fantastic. And I apologize that I stepped on you earlier because I was looking at the clock and I was going like, oh my God, if Fox reads his entire book, then I have to keep this at a reasonable hour, people can hang out. But that was wonderful, Fox, and please finish your thought about this encouraging thought that you were expressing just now. Oops, there's a lot of noise going on.
Oh yeah, I've got.
Please do finish that thought, because I think that's very, very important to hear again about how you overcome this the fear, the anxiety, the shyness to share your work like you just did.
Well, yeah. I mean, my entire life I've been trying to be like a writer, and when I was 18 years old, I was living in Poland at the time, and I wrote like a whole like 300-page novel, and it wasn't like a good novel, but like who cared? Like it was a novel. It was a writing success in
Yeah,
my mind.
by finishing it. I
And
mean, from top to bottom. Yeah, 300 pages. Yeah.
right, I mean that's really what's important. Like it's not the fact that you make a golden story every time you sit down and write something. Nobody makes a golden story every time they sit down and write something. That's not how writing works. That's not how any projects work. But people, when they sit down and they write, sometimes think that that's the end result. And so the first novel that I wrote, I lost it due to a hard drive failure, and that was really really hard for me when I saw that story disappear, all of that time and that work disappear, and I didn't write for a very very long time, and so it wasn't until I encountered Haven Celestia that I actually wrote again.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I did it was just to prove that I could. And this community, the Haven Celestia community, is like way more supportive than like a lot of other communities that if you ever try to get involved with an anthology could be. But really, at the end of the day, like if you believe that you have a story to tell, then you should tell it. And it might be like a little bit scary, and it might be a little bit hard, and it's not easy to find people that are even going to listen to the words that you've written. But that's what's kind of important about this thing that you're doing right now, Drax.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there's really not a lot of people or a lot of communities out there that are very responsive to authors like me. That I'm not published, like I write things, but through the book club,
But you made
I
it
get to.
into an anthology, and you finished something. I think what you said is very important, that finishing something is so super important. In that sense, you're more successful than a friend of mine who I went to a very prestigious music conservatory with. He, 25 years later, he still hasn't finished his Goldberg Variations record. You know, he's still sort of, tinkering with it. So I think that's an important sentiment.
Can I
Hey,
also say it's really important that if you don't find supportive writing communities, then I encourage everyone to create supportive writing communities and also to
Ah,
support
yeah.
writing communities that are supporting like writers. So as writers, it's really important that we support one another like at various stages of our journey because we're all on journeys. And so if we can go to part of that is buying people's books, but it's also doing stuff like this, like going
Yes.
to events and listening to other people read drafts or works in progress, and just letting them know that, reminding them that there are audiences out there who are interested in their stories but also interested in getting to know them as people, and who are willing to share their work with them as well. So those relationships and things like that, I feel like we all need them. And you hear a lot about like some, I guess, people having varying levels of good or bad experiences with different parts of the writing community. But always, if you're finding that it's hard to find one, then I would say like create one. And there's so many spaces. So with Second Life, there's also spaces at like libraries. Most libraries that I've gone to are really open to people opening groups, especially around, books and words and stories. So sometimes we have to create those spaces that we want to be a part of or that we need so that we do have those supportive places.
I meant to say earlier that one of the aspects of an open mic night that I've always really enjoyed is that some of my favourite authors I've come across through hearing them read, and it's a great way of meeting other writers. So for me, it's the social element of open mic nights that's really, very important to me.
Fantastic. I'm going to uh, finish the stream. People can hang out here until the cows come home. If they never come home, well, then so be it. I don't want to end this, but I have to um, end the stream so that we have a reasonable tight archive. Um, but I think this is a great way to wrap it up. And thank you, Fox, and thank you, Anne and Yvonne. And uh, if you want to read here, please message me or Yvonne or Anne. But I gladly take the job in putting this together. And I guess you guys said earlier that the reading should be about 5 minutes or so, give and take.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about 5 minutes, give or take, sounds really good because
Yeah.
then we have a chance for as many people to read as maybe I guess that's what 10 readers or so.
Yeah.
Um,
And if
and it
there's
also
not that many,
means
then you can go over. And I guess we also want to know. I mean, now I'm really curious, and I hope that Fox comes back because I'm really curious about this sort of the furry culture and how the furry culture can be very creative. That's something I would find I was really interested in, like how does the furry culture express itself
or maybe we'll
with
say
writing.
5 readers and everyone gets 10 minutes each. Um,
Well, we'll see
we'll
about
work
what
it
they
out
can
and
do.
we'll let Drax know, and then Drax can let everyone else know.
Great.
And can I,
Sound good?
as a non-fiction writer, can I read from like my favorite book or something? Can I do something like that or
No,
no?
you can write nonfiction. So, like, I write creative nonfiction and I write fiction. So, like, if you want to read creative nonfiction, that's great, but you just have to be the writer of it.
Okay. Oh, I got tons. I could read other. I produced over 300 California history segments. I could read some of those years ago. They're
So,
good.
We've
as
got,
long as it's not like a copyright problem, then.
Ah, yeah. Haymarket books. They're closed. I don't know.
Well, then, yeah. And so if it's just nonfiction, then I would say you might want to story it up some so that it's creative nonfiction. And that you're engaging us because imagine how many of us didn't read textbooks as kids. No, I'm just kidding. But
Well,
anyway,
I mean,
so
some of the radio pieces that we did about the inequities in California, with cleaning ladies working minimum wage in Pebble Beach and stuff like that. Those are good stories.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can certainly read them.
No, I don't want it anymore. I'm a stubborn child. Yvonne told me
I'm
that
not gonna
no,
beg you.
I'm gonna walk out of here.
You could do that, but oh, thank you for the tears. I like that. I'm working on being a more sensitive person.
You are. All right, so I'm gonna end the stream here and thank you guys. Um, thank you so much for
thank
coming. I'm just gonna end the stream here cold, and we'll
And
be
we'll see
back
everyone the first Friday
first
of the month.
Friday of the month, and the regular book club is every Wednesday. Next Wednesday is Peter Watts, Canadian author, and we also have a show called The Mystery Hour with Con Sweeney, which is going to start on the 20th.
Oh,
Yep.
didn't know about
Yeah, he's the at the board of directors of the Mystery Writers Association of America. He's, I think, the director of the New York chapter. He's gonna bring some mystery writers.
Oh, that would be fun.
But this is
Where's that
awesome.
going to
Next,
be?
oh, at the book club here. You've heard of it.
I've dropped by there from time to
Yeah.
time.
Oh, I hope that Ghost Speed next time will read something too. And Azrael, I heard that you write too. So I'm gonna stop the stream now, and thank you guys for watching outside here.
Thank you.